Hi, I'm Dr. Steve Elias, and welcome to the veinPODCAST. Respect the elders, embrace the new, and encourage the improbable and impractical without bias. Today, we're going to be speaking on a topic that goes by the acronym CRN, Coordinated Registry Network. Most of you probably don't have an idea about what this means, nor did I necessarily when we first embarked upon this. But we have three of the leading members that are trying to make this all work. And we'll get into what this means in terms of Coordinated Registry Network. But also, first, we're going to have everybody introduce themselves. So we're going to start with Jens Jorgensen. Tell us where you're from and kind of what you're doing.
Hi, I'm Jens Jorgensen. I'm a vascular surgeon from Portland, Maine at the Maine Medical Center. And I'm the medical director of the Society for Vascular Surgery Vascular Quality Initiative.
Okay, and we have Marlin Schul, who is...
Hi, Marlin Schul. I'm a venous and lymphatic specialist, Lafayette, Indiana. Been involved in registry development for about 10 years. Yeah, I'm current president of the American Vein and Lymphatic Society.
And last but not least is Nick Osbourne.
Hi, Nick Osbourne from University of Michigan. I'm a vascular surgeon there and at the VA in Ann Arbor, Michigan. I am also a health services researcher and specialize in kind of large database analysis and have really been working more recently on a lot of projects and examining kind of the outcomes and appropriateness of venous procedures.
Okay, so we have three people here are quite involved with collecting data, analyzing data, and the idea of a coordinated registry network is to kind of take diverse registries that are maybe looking at similar data points, but using them as in a coordinated manner to answer some specific questions. This all began a few years ago now. Actually with the original discussion we had from Vein magazine, kind of Marlin and Jens, amongst others, were talking about this, and we sort of took this up as a challenge to see if we could make this work between various organizations. So Marlin, just tell us about what the AVLS, you have a registry. Briefly, just a minute or two, tell us what it entails and in general what kind of data it picks up.
Great question, Steve. And I think you have to look at the inception. This registry was designed to eliminate duplicate entry, which is an extra cost to participating in a registry. And so every bit of data in our registry comes from EMRs that are formatted to dump data in a very granular way so that the values have meaning. We capture initial consults, duplex data at the outset, duplex follow-ups, all procedure details. And in addition, we're capturing quality of life variables using the SF6D and the HASTI score. And it's basically used as an advocacy tool to try to bring a face to the patients that we treat as we're seeing more and more scrutiny over vein care.
All right, so that's coming from your viewpoint. So that's the one registry that's kind of looking at data with our coordinated registry network, and then the other registry is Jens will take that. Explain what other registry that we're looking at as well.
Sure, Steve. The Society for Vascular Surgery Vascular Quality Initiative has 12 procedural-based registries covering the spectrum of arterial and venous disease. The idea behind these registries is to improve the care of the vascular patient using a data-driven approach. And with this large number of patients that we have in the registry and the granular clinical data, we can learn things that we wouldn't be able to learn from a single center series or a multi-center trial. It also has the advantages of providing real-world evidence. This has a full spectrum of providers of different specialties in different settings, inpatient, outpatient, office-based labs, vein centers, that allows us to see what's going on and to learn from each other. And so one of our registries is the Varicose Vein Registry, and I'll ask Nick to provide more details about the Varicose Vein Registry.
Yeah. Okay, so Nick, tell us kind of what the Varicose Vein Registry looks at, maybe some things that, because you've been looking now at both registries, and we've been talking about what AVLS registry has and what the SVS registry has. what does it look at that's similar, and what are some of the things that it captures that AVLS doesn't capture?
Yeah, that's a good start there, I think. So, the Varicose vein registry from the VQI is a procedural registry, which allows us to capture patients who've undergone procedures for varicose veins, C2 disease and higher, so non-cosmetic surgeries for venous disease. And the goal of that registry was to not only capture the kind of initial procedure and short-term outcomes, complications, but also longer-term outcomes. And so we capture them up to 1 year out from the procedure. And similar to the AVLS, we also capture patient-reported outcomes, which the Hasty score that was already mentioned is similarly captured in the varicose vein registry. The VQI, VVR registry and the AVLS registry both, I think, have robust amount of data. They have a wealth of patients in them, and I think they are set apart from a lot of other registries in vascular surgery and in surgery in general, because they do capture patient-reported outcomes, and that's a monumental improvement, and it really gives us data to drive kind of the next kind of level of evidence for venous disease. And it's really been a what I would say is a success of both registries to be able to do that. And it can be looked at as something that I think a lot of other registries are going to start to do, because it really is an improvement in not only capturing things that are very easy to capture, like whether someone's had a DVT or not, but things that are harder to capture, which are how happy people are after their surgery with the appearance and kind of the other complaints that go along with venous disease. And I think that gives us an opportunity to really study venous care in a much more granular manner and get a lot more out of it, and then be able to advocate for our patients, both getting the right treatments, but also that we're able to provide those treatments to those patients. And one of the differences between the registries that I'll highlight, though, I think, is that, like I mentioned, the VQI venous varicose vein registry is a procedural database where we're capturing patients who've undergone a procedure. Right. In contrast, Marlin has mentioned that the AVLS registry captures patients who have just been seen for a consult and have, a duplex result with venous disease, and they may not undergo a procedure. And so a main difference between the two registries is that in our case, we are capturing one part of the population that's undergone procedures. In the AVLS, they are capturing a larger cohort of patients which may or may not undergo procedures. And I think that's a natural marriage of these two to be able to work together.
So in the marriage, obviously, all marriage at some point becomes a compromise. So right, either that or it just doesn't work. So no, this kind of to take everybody through the growing pains that we kind of went through when we thought about getting these two registries together. And Nick, you kind of alluded to what we can get out of these by coordinating all of them, but you had to come up with some initial questions that we wanted answered, and questions that we thought both registries could support in terms of mining the data from each one of those registries. But prior to that, and we're going to get to that, and I want you guys to think about what are those initial questions, because we kind of came up with them. You need a name for what you're doing. And we came up with a name, and Jens is going to tell us what that name is, the acronym, and then tell us what it stands for.
Sure. The name of our group is COVER, COVER, Consortium of Venous Registries. And just to talk a little bit about the concept of Coordinated Registry Network, each of our registries has its own advantages and disadvantages, and we capture a different segment of the population. We have different providers who are putting input data into that. And so if you put them together, I think the sum will be greater than, the whole will be greater than the sum of its parts. Similarly, if someone is trying to answer a question, they have to say, which registry should I use? If industry or the FDA is trying to look at something, which registry would they use to get this information? Well, if we can harmonize our variables and definitions, then we can have our registries work together to try and address these questions.
All right, so let's talk about what cover is going to look at, or we want to see if we could make it work in terms of some of the questions. And we didn't start out with, answering some bit of minutia. We started out with what is a generalizable question to answer. Marlin, want to tell us one of those questions? It's not a test, don't worry.
Just one of those questions was for SEEP level. What was the average number of ablations for a patient given their level of C of SEEP? So it's basically crawl before you run, crawl before you walk, and we're trying to see if we can't take simple analyses and prove that we can do this.
So one thing I forgot to ask is the volume of patients that are in the registries. So the two together are going to add up to about what would we say? The ballpark. We're not going to hold everybody to one single thing.
Yeah, it's multiple hundreds of thousands.
So we're talking hundreds of thousands. All right, so we're going to get data from hundreds of thousands of patients, which is, a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And that's going to be good. So one question is going to answer number of ablations per patient per SEEP class,
mm-hmm.
which I think that has not really been discussed all that much in terms of breaking things down to SEEP class itself. There's been this generalizable, papers have come out generalizable in terms of number of ablations per patient, whatever, but clearly we're hoping to see that the higher the SEEP grade, maybe the more number of ablations.
Well, actually, what the Nikos and Crawford paper showed that they actually had nearly 0.4 ablations more if they had C6 disease, but that's the only one that I'm aware of.
Right. And that's not that much. All right. So that's one question. There were a few other ones that we were looking at answering as well.
Yeah, so I think longer term, some of the early ones are really these more questions that are really examining the database, understanding how the similarities and the differences between the database. And then as we get more experience with those, I think we then have a lot of interest in really looking at the outcomes of procedures and taking advantage of the fact that, the registries capture different populations in some cases, and so that we can get data from both. And so some of those questions are simpler questions and, simple in theory, I would say, not necessarily in execution. But some of those questions would be questions comparing thermal and non-thermal ablations, comparing different distributions of disease and ablations in different territories of the truncal veins. One that just, I think, is another valid comparison would be to look at, treating patients by their by the C score of their SEEP to see their outcomes in the different classes. So in a C2 versus C3, C4 patients, since we know that insurance companies and carriers are really scrutinizing reimbursement right now, we have to be able to provide them evidence of the efficacy of these treatments. And there's no better way to do that than with real world data. The VQI, VVR can give you a population of patients that are treated, but we can't give you a population of patients that weren't treated to compare them to. The AVLS, on the other hand, has that population too. So I think that's a natural longer term. That's more of a pie in the sky, analysis that I think we'll get to once we have these other ones done. But I think those are the fruits of the initial labors. Will be these really important studies where we can generate a population of patients that not only undergo treatment, but patients that do not undergo treatment, and we can really do more comparative effectiveness studies in this CRN.
So Jens, if you could bring us up a little bit. I mean, I think that this is great, and I want the listeners to understand that it's not just as simple of just plugging things into the database. It's a huge challenge here, and one of the challenges in the beginning, and why it's called a Coordinated Registry Network, is this is not a new concept. This has been done many other places, and one of the challenges is, and what people should understand is, nobody likes to give up their turf. And so by ascribing to a coordinated registry network idea, that can help take that out of the picture and put it under a different umbrella. But Jens, if you could just give us briefly where this kind of started a little bit, talk to us about Art Sadrakian and things like that, and let everybody know why it's not just, three people talking about how do we do this, but there's an overseer, so to speak, that's going to enable us to accomplish this in a better manner.
Well, I think if we start at the very beginning, the inception came from the U.S. Food and Drug Administration. And their responsibility is to ensure the safety and efficacy of devices that are used to treat medical conditions. And right now they're undergoing some rethinking of their approach to this. The traditional gold standard for device evaluation has been the randomized clinical trial. That has been criticized for a number of reasons. It becoming more difficult due to logistic and regulatory considerations. They're increasingly expensive, and they have been criticized because they are traditionally done at selected centers by selected providers on selected patients. And so whether this results of an RCT are generalizable to the public is unclear just because of the limited nature of an RCT. And so the FDA has expanded their concept of device evaluation to using real-world evidence, which is what you find in these clinical registries that are collecting patients by all different providers in different settings and using devices both on and off label for indications. So they came up with a concept of the NEST, which is the National Evaluation for Healthcare Technology. And the NEST is designed to look at all different devices, whether it's GYN, orthopedic, or vascular. But one of the offshoots of NEST was another acronym, RAPID, R-A-P-I-D, the Registry Assessment of Peripheral Interventional Devices. This is a public-private partnership consisting of academia, professional societies, including the American College of Cardiology, Society of Vascular Surgery, Society of Interventional Radiology, as well as governmental agencies, including the FDA and CMS, National Library of Medicine, and others, as well as industry partners, multiple industry partners who I won't begin to list the name of, as well as other interested stakeholders, EMRs, private consultants, and so on. And within that context, the idea was to come together with a more cohesive evaluation and assessment of devices used for peripheral interventional treatment of arterial disease. And this has been a successful collaboration. The first phase was to define common data elements, agreeing on definitions and variables, and then expanding it to look at developing objective performance goals for different classes of devices, such as balloons, stents, atherectomies, and so on. And so this process continues to involve, and we were hoping that we could use a similar process in the venous ecosystem.
All right, so the plan is also to reach out to industry to get them involved kind of in the next round to have a little bit more input in there, because we don't exist in a vacuum. Mm-hmm. And an industry has, they have a lot of skin in the game anyhow, but how from the rapid idea do you minimize the kind of individual agenda of a particular industry that's making a particular device when they say, okay, I'm going to sign on for this
Sure.
collaborative?
Yeah. I think the idea is to get all of the stakeholders around the table in the beginning so they have ownership over the process. And the idea behind the process is not to evaluate any particular device or design or pharmaceutical, but rather to come up with a conceptual process in how to do this properly. And as industry has significant involvement, they should have a word in how their devices are evaluated long term, along with all of the other stakeholders, which is FDA, whose job is to promote safety and efficacy, EMRs who may be collecting the data, academics who have been studying it, professional societies who also have a vested interest. So with everybody around the table working together, we hope to come up with a process that everyone can take ownership of.
Yeah. So talk to me a little bit about Marlin, your idea. We got together and we got together with some people who are going to help facilitate everybody working together through a coordinated registry network. During that meeting was Art Strakian,
correct,
from Cornell.
Weill Cornell Coordinating Center.
Right, because he has a lot of experience with other CRNs, right? Marlon, what do you how do you think that process has been thus far in terms of allaying the fears of whatever participants are there, like somebody's going to be taken over by somebody else.
I don't think that's a fear at all.
Good.
If the data is the data, and we both have quality registries. It's just they're not identical. So I don't think that's a concern.
Yeah, and I think it should be pointed out that when people kind of sign on to the CRN concept, it's not that every registry has, entree into every other registry's database. It's the opposite. It's that everybody keeps their own database, but they have come together to answer some of the questions that we already outlined beforehand. So it's, people are at times protective, which you understand. You put a lot of work into creating something, but for the greater good, what data can you get out that from both registries, or if there's 3 or 4 registries? Unfortunately, in the vein world, there's really only 2 registries at this time to answer the questions. About how long of a process do you think this would take? Nick, you're a data kind of guy. If we start today, and we get the data out in 2 months from both registries to answer the one question about CEEP class and ablations, how long do you think it takes from that time once the data gets out?
Yeah, so I think the first part really is examining the two and finding synergy in the two data sets and making sure that we have agreement. And we've been working on making sure that is the case. And I think one of the nice things is that honestly, the AVLS and the VVR both have fairly symmetric definitions of most things. And so we have a lot of synergy, and we have a lot of ability to use the same variable definitions already starting out of the gate. Now, once we have the data to analyze it and then to have quality control on it before we release any of the results, I think it's probably a 6-month process, to be honest with you, and get good results and make sure that it's that it is exactly what we want, because there's a little bit more risk to analyses when you're using data from multiple sources that we don't introduce any bias, and that we don't that we're not inadvertently including something that we shouldn't be. And so I think you have to have a little bit more rigorous quality control on the back end after you complete the analysis as well. So I would be a little conservative probably and say 6 months.
All right, so that's actually that's not that bad. I thought it might take longer. So let's wind down a little bit here. All registries are supported by the members of the various societies, and that's the ultimate goal, is to help our members do a better job and obviously to get paid for doing the right thing with data that we can show to those people who pay us that, this is the right thing to do, and there's more support, so the payers cannot just say, well, we don't think we should pay for an anterior ablation, saphenous ablation, or whatever. How do we get that word out that our members don't just think this is some academic exercise, but it has real world implications for them, that the more they support this, the more in the end it's going to come down? And let's just face it, in the end, they want to make money. They need to make money. So how can we use this in the appropriate way to help our members who are supporting the registry at the end of the day, that they have stuff that they feel comfortable, and they can go to insurers, and societies can go to insurers and say, this is the way it should be. Jens is raising his hand. Go, Jens.
Well, thank you. I would like to take a first crack at this one. One of the examples that we can use from the arterial space is that the data from the registry has been used both to the benefit of patients and also to industry. And one example is label expansion. So within the registry, devices are used both on-label and off-label. We have real-world evidence on those outcomes. And industry has taken that data, they've taken it to the FDA, and they successfully lobbied for a label expansion based upon that data, which is much more efficient and less expensive than doing another randomized clinical trial. And so now we're faced in venous disease, we're faced with the issue that some treatments are not covered. Some of the non-thermal, non-tumescent treatments are not covered, yet they are tracked within the registry. And that would be both to industry's benefit and to our patients' benefit if we could use that data, present it for a regulatory decision and gain approval.
Yeah, good practical example.
I think the way that we're going to successfully get these, get people excited about the CRN and about the registries and about participation is by deliverables and by delivering the finished product and completing these projects that have clinical applications and that we can then use as examples to better the societies, to better the membership of the societies and patients as well. And I think those are great examples. And I think in the venous world, we're ripe to do that right now with the data that we have. And I think both registries are already starting to do that. We can use the data that's already coming out of them to advocate for our patients and advocate for ourselves. And that's really the goal, I think.
And the other point that I would make is that as you move towards a coordinated registry network, the first thing you have to do is to get providers to participate in a registry. Mm-hmm. And Marlin made that point very well in his talk earlier today, the value of registry participation. And there are many values to it, but first of all, it can be used as a very effective quality assurance and quality improvement tool at the local level. And then it also provides this wealth of data that we can all learn for larger studies and analysis.
Yeah, and
once we have registry participation, then we can start having the registries work with each other.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. And Jens, that's where I was going as I pointed to Marlin for his summary. But you set him up. So Marlin, you are the champion of telling people why they really should participate in a registry. I give you the final say. So people listening to this will say, yeah, I kind of better sign up for one of these registries to get data to help the greater good. But to give me a final thing here.
The registry participation is critical. I mean, we're in a surgical specialty. Everything is under scrutiny. We're battling things on a regular basis. When you're showing your outcomes, when you're actually capturing what the patient says, and you can show that what you did makes a difference, it will make a difference when it's all said and done. To echo Nick's point, the registries need to show wins. Okay, so you have to have deliverables, and they both are doing that. If you are not participating, it may come back to hurt you because regulatory bodies are looking to force registry participation. And so there's two options. There's no reason to sit on the sidelines. Either you're going to be serious about the specialty and participate, or you're going to take whatever comes your way because there are a lot of forces in play when it's all said and done. And if you're not playing a role in supporting your practice and supporting what you do makes a difference, you may ultimately be squeezed out.
And I think that's a great point to end on. So people who think it's a little bit of a pain in the neck to enter your data, first of all, it's been made easier now with EMR and stuff with some of the registries. But as Marlin implied, some of the insurers now are thinking about, maybe one of the reasons that you should be reimbursed is that you do participate in a registry because you're showing your results. You're not hiding behind something. So I think this is a great start, and we're going to come back at some point and talk about the deliverables once we deliver them. But the takeaway here is, in my mind, for those of you who are listening, that it's better when everybody works together. And it all starts from the grassroots with the people who are doing the procedures. So get your data into a registry, and then the cover is going to answer some of these questions and help to advocate for you and your patients. All right, guys, I want to thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We hope you enjoyed today's veinPODCAST in association with Radcliffe Vascular. We aim to bring you important topics from the vein world, either topics that we ourselves feel are important or you, our listeners, feel are important. So review us on your favorite podcast app or send your thoughts, comments, and questions to podcast@Radcliffe with an E-group.com. That's podcast@Radcliffe-group.com. You could also register to access newsletters, videos, and peer-reviewed journal articles. Thank you. Glad you listened. This is Dr. Steve Elias, and we'll see you on the next veinPODCAST.